What is up, everybody? Eddie Barco here, and welcome once again to the Nebula Music Podcast. This is a show where I talk to some of today's most inspiring and influential musicians, and anybody who's doing something really cool in the music industry. I have them here on the show to talk about creativity and what drives their passion. Today, I'm excited because I have Mondo Cozmo joining me for a very, very cool conversation. If you haven't heard of Mondo, let me tell you, he is a fantastic songwriter and performer. I mean that, fantastic songwriter. In this conversation, we got the opportunity to really explore how he approaches music and songwriting, and it's really cool because he actually wrote an entire album. He actually wrote it and produced it in less than 12 days and had it out there for the world to hear in such a quick turnaround time. I was very impressed to understand how he approaches that songwriting, how he's able to get an idea down so quickly and know which ones to keep, which ones to let go. I mean, his instinct is absolutely phenomenal, and I'm excited that I get to share that conversation with you. So if you're a songwriter or someone who's interested in songwriting, or maybe just a professional looking to improve their songwriting skills, I think this is a great conversation for you because Mondo Cozmo does a great job of breaking down how he approaches songwriting and some of the cool things that he practices to ensure that he's at his best when he makes music. So let's not waste any more time. Let's dive right in. All right, what is up, everybody? Eddie Barco here again, and welcome once again to the Nebula Music Podcast. I'm very excited, guys, because I have a very special guest with me today, and I'm excited to get a chance to get to know him today. I have my man, Joshua Ostrander, also known as Mondo Cozmo, joining me today. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing good, Eddie. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you for joining me on the show. Joshua was telling me before we started recording that he is held up in the mountains right now, basking in nature as, you know, as we're all stuck at home. He did the right thing and he decided to go up in the mountains and spend this quarantine up there for a couple of weeks. How are you enjoying it up there, man? How is life up in the mountains right now? Because you're still in California, but you're, like you were telling me, you're a couple miles away, close to Lake Arrowhead in the beautiful mountains. I think that's what, the Los Angeles forest or something like that?
Yeah, it's the San Bernardino forest. It's really beautiful. Yeah, I've been up here for like 2 months. I haven't really been taking full advantage of the nature as I've been. Well, it's just like it's such a great opportunity to record. So I've just been doing that a lot. But the wife, you know, she'll encourage me to go down and take a walk and do stuff like that. So it's really helpful.
I imagine it's not that crazy out there. Like you were saying earlier that it's a small town, I imagine, right?
Yeah, it's pretty chill. I kind of love it. Yeah, it's been really nice to, been really blessed to be able to because like I said, when I was talking to you, I said we went down to LA for a couple of days and I had to go to the grocery store and I had to wait in line for like 45 minutes. And I was like, I'm really struggling with this. This, like, you know, I'm a germaphobe to begin with before this thing. So I was just like, oh my God, I got to get out of here. But we've been doing good and doing a lot of writing and recording, which feels good. Just trying to stay sane.
Yeah. Do you guys write together, you and your wife?
Yeah, we do. We write a lot together. She helped me co-write Shine and some other songs. So she's kind of a super force. She has her own band called AO.
Nice.
And she has her studio and I have mine, and we come together on certain things, and it's a lot of fun. It's nice to have a writing partner too that you can bounce ideas off.
Yeah, I imagine it's probably one of the best kind of partnerships that you can have, being able to have that trust with somebody and be able to share creatively. Yeah,
it's good, and she's really good at you know, encouraging me to work on certain things, or if something is kind of like not great, very politely being like, hey, you should, you know what I mean? There's the way I've noticed, like, really good songwriters have that ability to talk to other people and try to, without crushing their spirit, encouraging. It's really important.
Yeah. It's like a very good managerial skill. You know what I mean? Like being able to communicate in a very effective way and honestly while getting your point
Yeah,
across.
it's a talent, man. It's a gift. You know, some people can do it. It's really cool.
Yeah, I find that truly fascinating. I know that we're going to spend some time talking about your career, but I actually find that very unique. I know that in the music industry, I have noticed that people, when it comes to writing music, I think you might have even been saying this a little bit, is they're either super individualistic, like they just need to write on their own, or they're very good at collaborating. And I very rarely find someone who's kind of in between. And so based on what you're telling me, it sounds like you're very good to collaborate with, or at least with
No,
someone you respect.
Eddie. I am terrible at it.
Really?
I when Mondo started, like, you know, my publisher, I have a publishing company, and they're like, we want you to go and write with people. I'm like, yeah, awesome. This will be so much fun. And it was just a train wreck. It just never worked for me. So it's only worked with a couple people that I've had, you know, like Dan Wilson is one who I just were able to communicate well enough. And the thing with me is I take the song, but I need to go away by myself and do it. And then kind of like I'm good to start with someone, but I need to finish it on my own. If that makes sense.
Interesting. You know what's funny is I actually just worked with somebody. I'm not a songwriter at all. I'm a drummer. But I did come across somebody who is a songwriter producer who is kind of the opposite, who prefers to start with their own idea and kind of produce it and have a very, very raw idea of what they're trying to get to. And then they join in with other collaborators, and then they're more open to do it that way. They actually don't like going in with nothing. It's strange.
It's so cool. Everybody might have a different way to get it done. I love that.
I know, and it's interesting. The more you work with people, the more you find that's kind of how the brain ticks. I'm curious for you. How long have you been a songwriter / in the music industry?
I've been doing it since I was in high school, man. I was always I grew up down the street from a band that was signed to Columbia Records. Their name was Trip 66, and it was just like kind of like a Janis Joplin sounding lead singer with some rock and roll behind it. They're amazing. But I was just a young kid, so I would always hang out with them. They're a couple years older than me. And I would just go over and watch them rehearse like every day after school, and they were my heroes, you know, and they took me in and were really sweet to me. So yeah, I started in high school. I started my own band, and we just started playing out as much as we could. And that was it, man. I was gone. Once I figured out a couple chords, I knew what I wanted to do.
So straight from high school, you basically had your idols, and then you started your own music. Did you know right away, like while you were in high school, that you wanted to do music full time, or did you go to college and do a couple other things before you started doing it full time?
No, I didn't go to college. Yeah, I knew I was touring pretty heavily through. Like I would go up and play like New York City, and then like have to go to high school the next day.
Oh, because you grew up in Philly, right, in the East Coast.
I grew up in Philly, yeah. So we started touring. I started touring pretty heavy, pretty young, and then I just knew I didn't want to go to college. I just wanted to keep doing music. So I would always have like a job on the side, and it would be a job that would let me go and, you know, go on tour for a couple of weeks, and then always come back to them. But I've pretty much been doing it since high school, which is kind of crazy to think.
Yeah, it is crazy to think. And in my experience of working with different kind of artists from different walks of life, it is always fascinating to me that the moment that you decide that this is what you want to do. And it's always interesting, the differences in that moment, you know, that decisive moment. Some people have a very, I don't even know how to describe it, but a very definitive moment. Like they remember the day when they were like, oh, I'm going to be a musician. And there are others that it's more, not even, I wouldn't even call it a gradual. It's just kind of in you. And so you just always assume that that's the thing. And then you just end up doing it. You know, it's never like a definitive decision. Was yours that way in the sense that you were just doing it a lot, so you just decided this is it? Or was it a very definitive decision?
It was pretty definitive. I was obsessed, man. I just loved it. I was like, this is it. I'm going to do this. I am going to figure out how to do this. And it was never like a stressful thing. It was always love. And I was just like, this is what makes me happy. And, you know, and my family saw that. They didn't give me any grief about not going to college. They were completely supportive. They're just like, yeah, you're going to be broke, but go do it. You know, like it
Well,
was
yay,
pretty
mom and
cool.
dad. Hey, those are some
Yeah.
cool parents, man.
Yeah, they're the best. Yeah, I'm super blessed in that aspect. They're very much, follow your dreams, follow your heart situation, which is I was really blessed to have that.
Do you think that played a huge part in your ability, in the fact that you had supportive parents?
I guess so. I mean, yeah, I mean for sure, because there were times when I didn't have a place to live, so my folks got divorced, but I could always go sleep on my dad's couch, and he'd give me some work, landscaping and stuff if I needed it. So yeah, there's no way I would have been able to do this without like their generosity and their support. So I'm super thankful for them.
All right. So then you started touring pretty heavily when you were early on, and you decided that this is what you wanted to do. You were traveling up to New York a lot. How was the scene actually back then? I mean, I don't mean to say it back then like it was a long time ago. It really wasn't. But I know music scenes change quite a lot every 5 or 10 years. So I'm curious for you, what were some of the differences that you noticed from the music scene in the East Coast, especially New York back then, to maybe what it is now?
It was just a little dirtier. um, you know, we were playing some of the clubs, aren't there anymore and stuff like CB's and CB's Gallery or whatever, and a lot of weird shows where you're like, why are we playing this bar and they're not there anymore? But there's still like the bars like Pianos and bars like I can't think of them anymore, but it was just great because we were able to keep playing them. There was the club in Philadelphia called the Khyber Pass, and I played that thing. Man, I played it like twice a month for years, opening up for anybody, and some nights you would open up for Jet or the Strokes or Black Rebel Motorcycle Club before they were a bigger band, but it was so cool to be able to like cut my teeth as a younger guy and see these bands like how they perform, how they walk on stage, like what beers are they drinking, what cigarettes do they smoke, and like I just soaked it up. I was so into it.
Yeah. Was it very common back in those days? Looking back at it now, do you feel like it was very common to open up or rub shoulders with up and coming bands that are household names now? But back then, obviously, they were more, up and coming all around. Does that make sense? Like, was it very common to see a lot of those bands looking back at it now, or was it rare?
No, it was pretty cool. And like I remember, and this taught me a lesson early on, was like, like we played with the Strokes a couple times when I was a kid, but like watching them succeed, I was never upset about it. I was always like, fuck, this is great. Like I just played with these guys. I can succeed possibly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it never, like, me and my group were never like, oh, those jerks, why not us? You know what I mean? Which I seem to find a lot.
Yeah.
But I was genuinely just psyched because I'm like, why would I be pissed? Like, that could have been us. Like, we're hanging out with these guys. So, it in that sense, it was pretty cool.
Yeah. What were some of the things that you feel like you absorbed from playing and opening up with a band like the Strokes, for example? Because I imagine that there's tons, and some of it might have even been subconscious, maybe not obvious lessons that you might have learned. But I'm curious, doing something like that is something for the books, obviously, something that clearly has helped you succeed in your own music. I'm curious if you ever have spent some time looking back at it and being like, I can see the way I don't know, play my guitar or walk on stage this way. I'd probably learned it or it was influenced by this person from that band.
I mean, just watching, I remember thinking, when I would see a band like Black Rebel Motorcycle Club or Brian Jonestown Massacre or the Strokes or like those bands like that, I was always just blown away by, I was just like, they're writing songs that I can't write yet. So like that was just a real lesson to me, was like to be a better songwriter, because they're writing tunes that like I'm gonna hear on the radio in a couple months. You know what I mean? There I was like, oh my god, this is a real song. It makes sense. It has a chorus. It's like it rhymes. So it really just pushed me to write better songs. And man, it would take me years, I would think, till I was at the point where I was like, looking now, I could be like, that's actually a really good tune. It, probably took 10 years of writing.
Yeah. Can I ask you, what was it that made you feel like you actually wrote a good tune? Because, and here's the thing, here's kind of where I'm coming from. And I feel like this is the natural evolution of every musician, everybody who wants to be a songwriter. But I'm always curious when someone gets to that moment, right? And I always hear this too. I always hear this when a songwriter is like, oh yeah, I've been writing for a long time and I remember it wasn't very good, but at some point I wrote something and I was like, oh yeah, that's a good song. What changed your opinion about your music? And I'm not saying that you never liked it. I'm saying, when was it that you recognized, oh yeah, this is a good song. I'm at a place where I know I'm a good songwriter.
I think for me, it was when I started to realize that less is more when it comes to a song. At least for me, it was very much like, what can I do with one chord or two chords? You know what I mean? Like Shine is just 3 chords, it was just like, once I started figuring out that you really need the melody to be the leader. And so what's going to set that up? And a lot of times when I write with people, they'll have like a pretty crazy chord formation going or like a lot of chords. And my brain can't figure it out. I'm so dumb that I'm just like, I need real simple things, because all I care about at the end of the day with the song is about the melody.
And did you always, was that the same thing when you were a teenager or even in your early 20s when you were touring back then a lot? Do you notice those similarities? Did you also like the simpler things back then, or were you also about like the crazy complicated stuff, and then over time you fell more in love with the simpler approaches?
I think I was listening to a lot of things that were simple, but in actuality, I was just trying to be loud and put on a show or something. I don't know. I was trying to write, but I didn't feel, and even at the time, I didn't feel like my writing was good enough. But it just encouraged me to keep trying.
Yeah. And so now that you are more successful and you actually have created a career for yourself, I'm curious then, how would you say that you write a song from like beginning to end, or if that's even possible? Like maybe you just decide that I'm going to try and write as much as I can over this 2 chord progression, and then you come up with a melody and that goes somewhere else. Like, I'm curious what your songwriting process looks like, because as we said a little bit earlier, everyone has something a little bit different from the other person. But I'm curious for you, it seems like you've learned from a lot of greats, but also from yourself, from a lot of experimentation, and now you have a simpler approach. But like you said, simpler is usually better. I'm curious what your song process looks like a little bit.
I think the thing with me is I have a pretty strict regimen as to, like, I get up, I have my coffee, and I start writing right away in the morning. I seem to write my best in the morning, especially lyrics. I always have a ton of like chord progressions or like grooves that I'm working on. So I usually just fly through them and kind of listen to voice memos. I'll find something that I'm kind of into. And then honestly, like, I just follow excitement. So if I'm working on something that I'm into, I usually finish the song in a day just because I won't stop until it's done. But if I'm not excited about something, I move on right away. I never try to force the subject, because if I'm working on something that I'm not into, this has happened so many times where I'll go back 2 months later and open it up and have a whole different melody once I hear it. And I just love that. So I try to never push a song to get done, because I don't think that works for me.
Interesting. So you feel like that's a different songwriting style than to yourself, because I feel like there are plenty of other people that are very good at having a specific vision and a specific deadline. I mean, there's a lot of people that I know that are, under contract for publishing houses, that's all they do. They're basically told, hey, we need this kind of song, that kind of song for this project and for that movie and for this. And that's what they do. And they get that job done from A to B, or from A to Z rather. But it sounds like you prefer to kind of let the song form itself. And if it's not forming itself, it sounds like it's easy for you to step away and maybe come back to it later or never even revisit it?
Yeah, I guess I'm pretty blessed with not having like deadlines at times. That sounds terrifying. Um, but yeah, I think if I were just left to my own devices, I would just record probably rock and roll music, just you know what I mean, like
Yeah.
bass, drums, guitar. But to be honest, like I get so bored with myself when I do that. Once in a while, it'll work really well. Like we just released a song a little bit ago called "Come On," and it was just a really good song, and it's just a really simple delivery. It's just drums, bass, and guitar, you know. And when it works, it's special. But I just get so bored with when every song sounds like that for myself. So I'm always trying to find something that's like taking me in a different genre or something like that. Like that really excites me when I can. And then when I play it next to a song, it's completely different, but somehow it works because the vocal is making it work. That excites me.
Yeah. Has there ever been a song where you've really decided to work hard on it? It sounds like your approach is probably the best approach, in my opinion, as most artists, or I would argue some of the best art is created when you allow it to just breathe and allow it to form itself. But do you remember, or was there ever a moment where there was a specific song that you just felt needed to be worked on more than other songs?
Honestly, man, most of my stuff is recorded in a day or two.
Jesus,
And
man, that's impressive.
I mean, I just work really fast, and I write when I'm into something. I write lyrics really fast. I think anything. I'm trying to think. Like I have songs I've been working on for years. You know what I mean? But I can't think of any that have been released. It seems like everything that gets released was a really simple process, and it was just like this is done, moving on. You know. Um,
How does that feel like, though? Again, here's the thing, because I'm a drummer, right? And
mhm.
this always piques my curiosity. I am not a songwriter by any means. And I'm sure all of us, we can all be songwriters if we work just as hard as you do. But, you know, we all choose our different paths and we all have things that keep us interested. And for me is drumming and production and that whole thing. But the very few moments that I've tried to write a song, I have caught myself with this very, I guess, pivotal decision making that I can feel it. I know when it comes, when I have to decide either to keep working on this or to just let it go. And usually, and I got to be honest with you, I usually just keep working on it because I don't know, I get very dedicated. You know what I mean? Like my personality is when I'm working on something, I want to finish it and I won't be happy until it's done. But you're like the polar opposite. It seems like you have found major success by just being like, nope, not working, next one. Nope, not working, next one. Oh, this one kind of works. And finish it real quickly. Like I can't do that, man. It's crazy. And it's just, it's bizarre to me because I feel like I have heard many legendary songwriters, the first ones that come to mind, the Beatles, say very similar things, that when something doesn't work, they just don't even bother with it. I think I don't know what the phrase was, and I don't want to claim like I know, but I think they said something, they don't spend any more than like 5 minutes on a riff or something, and then they just decide to move on. Was that always your personality? Like, were you always that kind of guy to just like move on, or is that something that you learned?
No, growing up, I was always the kid that I was the first one in the studio, last one to leave. And I would never stop working on a song until it was done. So I remember that. I remember like the passion of that and how exciting it was to be the guy that had to finish it and had to get it done, you know, like I love that. But I just think, for me, like I need to wake up in the morning being excited to work. And there's, you know, if I've been working on a tune for 3 or 4 days and I'm like, I'm still working on it, that's not going to make me get up and go down into the studio and sit there for 10 hours, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I just but also a real thing for me is like, I get off on when a new song suddenly happens, that excitement, like that is just like, it is such a rush for me. I'm in the best mood all day, and I chase that, you know, so I'm always on the hunt for that.
I love that. Would you say that there are times where you might struggle with focus then? Like, what if you're working on a song, right? Let's say that you just had this good idea and you start writing it, and then 10 minutes later there's this other tune that comes in. Do you find yourself basically jumping ship and just going to that better idea?
I just chase. I jump ship like twice a day. I'm like this. Like, yeah, I follow the excitement. Yeah.
I love that. You know, it's because to me, it's so foreign, man. Like, it's very, very foreign. And I know that this is the way that there are specific people like you that work very well like this. But to me, I'm built to not do that. You know what I mean? Like, I'm the polar opposite, where I'm very good at, you give me a project and I will get it done. I will fight through everything that comes my way to get it done. But see, I also think, and I firmly believe, that some of the best music, you know, is created the way that you're creating it, not putting any limits to it, not putting any deadlines or any fences or whatever. You just kind of let it go and you let it create itself. And that's why we have people like you. That's why you exist, is to create that kind of music. You know what I mean? Well, see, here's what I'm curious about then. So for then the album that you released like 3 years ago, I think it was Plastic Soul. You have a couple songs on that album. I'm curious if all those songs were made in that very similar format. Were they all very quick and easy to make?
Oh, Eddie. So I had a couple songs that I had been working on. I was working like 2 landscaping jobs at the time, and I had recorded a couple songs that I thought were really good. One was Shine, one was Hold On to Me, one was Plastic Soul, and the fourth one was Higher. And I was like, I got 4 songs here that are good. And then we signed a deal. I started releasing music, and then we signed a deal really fast because the song started getting played on the radio without any representation. So, you know, we signed a record deal really quick. And then we started talking about what we wanted to do. And then we took Shine to radio, and Shine looked like it was going to go to #1.
Wow.
And the label was like, we have to get a record in. We have to get this a full length in before it goes to #1. And I was like, okay, I can do that. I was like, how much time do I have? They said, you have 2 weeks.
Wow.
So I went out to the Joshua Tree. I rented a house, and I just fucking finished the record in 2 weeks and handed it in. And that was Plastic Soul.
Jesus.
So I had a lot of starts. Like, it wasn't just like coming from nowhere, but I just saw, I love deadlines. I do love them. I love somebody being like, you have to have this done by then. I love to have a list in front of me of like things that need to get worked on. So I do like that, but 2 weeks.
Yeah. And so was every song on that album, you said that some of them you already had worked on before, like there were some ideas that you already had played around with?
Yeah. So I had 4 songs done. So I had to finish 6 songs in 2 weeks.
Okay. And then did you actually end up making more and then you just scrapped a whole bunch of them, or did you pretty much just settle on the first 6 that you made?
Since I had been writing so much while I was landscaping, like I had ideas and stuff. So I kind of knew when they were like, do you have 6 songs? I kind of had an idea of being like, yeah, I would like to do these 6, you know, and it was a conversation that we had. They're like, well, we'd like to hear this one. So there was probably like 20 songs available that were probably good enough to make the record. But once we figured the 6, I had to go and finish recording them and get it done and writing them.
Yeah. And then since you released that album, have you had to have similar deadlines like that? Or was that the only time?
Yeah. So no, because there was the really hard one was we put out an EP called Your Motherfucker. We were touring so much because Shine started to, you know, when Shine hit #1, it was kind of like bonkers for a couple months where it was just like I had to do every morning radio show and I had to do every meet and greet, and we're playing 2 shows a day, and you know, it was crazy, but it was like the first time anybody ever really cared about my music, so I was saying yes to everything, you know.
Yeah.
And then I mean, like midway through a tour, they're like, we need to put out an EP to keep the momentum going and to have stuff to sell at shows. And I was all about it. But that was a really hard EP to get done because of touring and stuff like that.
How long did that EP take you in comparison to the other album?
That probably took like 2 months to get done, just because like I didn't really know what songs I wanted to do. I didn't know what direction to go to. It was a little bit of a lost time for me, but I love some of the songs that are on there, and I'm glad we did it. But it was definitely like, I don't like doing that if I'm on tour, like trying to write material for an album. I didn't like that.
Yeah. I'm curious because, and here's something that I'm actually kind of fascinated in, and I'm hoping that you can shine a light. I've met plenty of musicians, and I've worked with plenty of musicians that write a lot on the road, just because when you're that busy and you're touring, you know, not many people know what that lifestyle is like, but you're constantly on the road. And like you were saying, sometimes you play 2 shows, you get on the bus, and then you go to the next city and you do that again the next day. It can be very, very tiring. But I've met plenty of musicians that actually that use that time to write a lot. Because, you know, when you're on the road, yes, you're playing shows, but then while you're on the bus or in the van or whatever, you're kind of sitting there for a couple hours. And I know that a lot of people like to use that time to write. Do you like writing when you're on the road specifically, or do you hate it? Or are you indifferent?
I really don't like doing it. I try. There's been like a couple times when we were lucky enough to have like a bus. So to be able to set up like a little Apollo rig in the back and have your laptop, and you can actually do some recording, was fun. But it just, I can't think of anything that has come from the stuff that I've tried to do on tour. I think I'm really just best left to my own devices at my house in my little room where I'm like really comfortable, and I can scream into a microphone and know that it's just my neighbors that hate me, you know? So it's like, it's just, it doesn't work for me. And yeah, I don't know. I'm sure like, you know, like dudes like Willie Nelson can write sitting on the toilet or wherever, you know?
It's a specific kind of skill set to be able to do that.
Yeah.
So then when you're left to your own devices, what kind of ideas do you play around with when you are writing songs? Is basically anything on the table, or do you try and pursue certain themes with your songs?
I always start with an acoustic, almost always start with an acoustic. Just a couple chords. I find a chord that I like. I'll try different tunings. I'll try different capo, you know, spots. I'll try to find the right key that I want it to be in. And then I usually just, at that point, go and try to find the beat. I have like a library of beats from, you know, past recordings. And then, you know, there's such, as much as you probably hate it, there's such access to so many drum loops and stuff nowadays.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So I hate telling drummers like, oh yeah, use a sample. I'm sorry. But so I usually, because for me, it's all about the groove of the song. So if I find a nice beat, I usually just put a scratch track down, which would just be a verse and a guitar, or a verse and a chorus, verse chorus situation. And I always try to get a scratch vocal down on it, because I always feel like that is the smartest thing that I've ever learned to do, is just get a vocal idea down. Because sometimes it's really great and you don't know it until you come back to it.
Interesting. And so in terms of the actual messages of the song, and I'm not sure if that's something I'm allowed to ask, but I'm curious, when it comes to what you're actually saying with your lyrics, do you find that your lyric themes tend to go through a very specific route, or do you allow yourself to kind of talk about anything?
Yeah, I try to talk. I don't try to put rules on that ever. You know, some of my favorite songs of all time are just the dumbest lyrics ever, you know? So like for me, again, it's all about the melody and making sure the melody is coming through. And then I try to have like 1 or 2 lines that I'm really excited about, then I start writing the song around them. But it almost always comes from just a scratch vocal and the mumblings. I just love how the brain will somehow create a sentence that you weren't planning on saying, but when you listen back to it, you're like, did I just say that? That's great. It's so interesting.
I love that. And so then I know that you just released a new single a couple of weeks ago, right? If I'm not mistaken, Upside Down.
Yeah. Upside Down. Yeah.
Did you release that during the pandemic?
Wasn't planned. It was, so yeah, we've had that that was supposed to come out now. And, it came out, I think 2 weeks ago, I'm going to say, or April 10th or something like that. And, we had the talk. We're like, look, this is nuts. Do we do this? And we're like, yeah, fuck it. Let's just do it. Like, the song's called Upside Down. It's kind of like about the world ending. You know what I mean? I was just like, oh my God. This is either awesome or terrible, but I don't know. But it's a good song, so let's put it out.
Sometimes those coincidences kind of match up. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting couple weeks leading up to it.
So what was the inspiration then for the song? Because I know that, like you were saying, this wasn't planned. Nobody planned for what we're currently living through. And by the time this is released, I'm not so sure where we're going to be at in terms of how we're going to be living in Los Angeles. But I know that at the time of recording this, when you recorded your song, Upside Down, you definitely weren't thinking about a pandemic. At least I'm willing to bet that you weren't.
No, I'm so dumb, dude. Yeah, so I was, again, that was just like I woke up, started messing with some samples and grooves. I found something I really liked. And it was during the impeachment trials, and I was just watching a ton of news. I would wake up and watch it, and then I'd watch it at lunch, and then I'd watch the evening news. And so I thought that it would be a cool line to have to start the song. Would be like, every single night I watch the evening news and wonder if the cards are really stacked, if they're coming from the dealer. And that was it. I was just off. Once I wrote that, that song took 2 days to do, but the vocals were all done by lunchtime.
Yeah. Can I ask you a random but objective question? Do you feel like nowadays, and I know this is kind of out of left field, but it's just something that crossed my mind, and I'm curious what you think, because you have a very good approach to music. Do you feel like the impact that music has, do you feel like it is greater or lesser now than it was, say, like back in the 60s? And I mean, I don't want to say politically, but I mean, like, if you look at the era, right, of what things were being said in music, you can definitely see a pattern, right, of what was happening at the time and what people were thinking. And I feel like the music pretty much reflected what everyone was feeling. Nowadays, because there's so much more of it, there's so much more music, whenever a song comes out that isn't necessarily about something specific, but it's clearly trying to spread a message, I sometimes find myself wondering, is music as impactful now in terms of spreading that message as it was back then? And I know it's subjective and it depends on who you are as a person, but I'm curious for you, in your experience, what you've seen in your career, do you feel like music is making that impact? If it's greater now, about the same, or maybe is it a little bit less or different?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit less than what it was during like the Vietnam War and stuff like that. Like, that was a really special time.
Right.
And the culture was a little bit different, I think. Yeah, it's tough now because as a songwriter, like this record was written during like the Kavanaugh hearings and the impeachment trials and stuff like that. So it was really like weighing on me. Like, I'm a super proud American, but I'm like having issues with my country right now, and that sucks, because like I really love my country, and and it's tough. So, and how do you write a song? I think my job is to bring people together. You know what I mean? And it's like, I will stick up for what I think is right. But at the same time, it's like, how do you write a song that brings people together? And I mean, I think if you're trying to write an anthem or something that's going to capsulize what's happening right now, I don't know if that works. It's usually like, the Macarena will come around and that'll be the thing that, you can't try to chase it down. It's just, I think you just got to write a lyric that is true, or is just something that is creative to you, that rings, that you're going to want to sing every night for the rest of your life,
Yeah. Why do you think that you can't chase it down? I'm curious. And obviously I'm pretty sure I know the answer, because based on how you how I've come to understand your personality and how you approach writing. But objectively speaking, why do you feel like it isn't the best approach to try and chase down that message that you're talking about?
I just think a lot of songs that become, anthems for a specific time period weren't written for that. It's just the music and the vibe and the lyrics somehow translated to people. At the same time, you got Dylan who can do that, and has done that. But I mean, that's a really rare thing. I don't know. I just feel like for me, like I see other artists kind of like they're releasing new songs now that are written about COVID. And I'm like, I get that. And some of them are really good. But for me, I'm just like, I don't think anybody's going to want to hear a song about COVID-19 next year. And I'm not going to want to talk about it. You know what I mean? Like,
it's true.
I don't want to, I don't know. That's just me personally. Like, I can't wait for this to be over. This is like a terrible movie that I never want to talk about again.
Yeah. And hopefully there's not a sequel. You know what I mean?
Right.
No, but the reason why I wanted to ask that, and I find this fascinating as we start to tie this all at the end, it's interesting to me to hear how you basically create your music, how you sound like you're very comfortable with who you are and how you create. And to me, when I heard your song Upside Down and I saw it come out, again, I knew it wasn't planned. I know you didn't sit here and plan for all this to happen, but it was coincidental how it came out when it did, and that it was about what it was about. And so, to me, I was curious what you thought about it, and I think you couldn't have said it any better. I do think sometimes the messages, there is this desire as artists and creators to try and actually make a difference. But I do feel like sometimes that can be chased a little bit too much. And that's just my opinion. But I do think, like you said, sometimes the best work occurs when you just kind of let it be, right? And you just don't chase anything specific. And again, this kind of depends on who you are, and I'm not trying to get in anything specific there, but I just wanted to gather your thoughts on it because I do think it's coincidental, but I also feel like that by it being coincidental, it actually might have a bit of an impact, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean? But anyways, my man, dude, I wanted to thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be on the show. I know that we're cutting this one a little bit short because I know that we've all got our time constraints, and today has been a very fascinating day. But I'm really happy that I got a chance to talk to you and get to know a little bit about your music and about your creative style and how you approach a song. What is up next for you? Now, I know that your plans are obviously all over the place because of where we're at, but are you starting to make plans for the year at all, or are you just sitting tight?
Yeah, it kind of changes every day. What's the touring story of it? It's like I heard, right now it seems like October might be a thing, but the next day it's like, no, it's not going to be a thing. So I don't know. We have a record coming out June 12th. It's called New Medicine. And so I don't know how we're going to support that without being on tour. I don't. So yeah, it's a new world and it's a new experience, and we're trying to navigate it daily. So
yeah,
I just try to stay sane and just keep writing and keep recording. And that's the best thing that I can do, I guess.
No summer festivals, huh?
Oh my gosh. Can you imagine?
I mean, there's so many big ones that aren't occurring anymore, like I can't imagine it, but at the same time, I feel like every day just gets more and more real. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And I read like New York Times had something yesterday. It was like, it gave you 3 different options of how the next 2 years are going to play out with the COVID. And I was just like, wow, fuck.
Shit, man. Well, can I ask you real quick before I let you go? How do you see this changing the music industry? Do you see it going back absolutely 100% back to normal after this? Or do you feel like there's going to be some adjustments?
I think a lot of, I was reading something again today where it was like, I wonder if labels will even go back to offices. You know what I mean? Because it's like everybody is functioning at home. So it's like, will there even be offices anymore? Or like, will they be so extravagant? Do they need them? Things like that might change. I think there's going to be a ton of music coming out, for good or bad, maybe. I don't know, but there's going to be a lot because nobody's touring. Everybody's home, and I think a lot of artists are feeling the pressure of like, I have to record now because everyone else is, you know? So I'm psyched because I think there's going to be a ton of great music coming down the pipe. But yeah, I don't know. The touring thing is kind of like how I make a living. So I am like super concerned about that. I don't know. I don't know how it's going to work, and I don't want to put people in a situation where they don't feel comfortable, you know, either. So it's going to be really interesting, Eddie. I don't know.
Yeah. But I mean, we all have high hopes though. I mean, I think that things are being figured out. I think that live streaming, by the way, has become something that no one ever saw. I mean, I think most people saw that it was going to be a big thing at some point, but it has really helped people step up their game lately. You know, like live streaming, everyone's live streaming now. But you're right. I do feel like there's going to be tons of music coming out. The minute that everything is okay, the minute that the health crisis is done, everybody's going to release an album.
Dude, it's going to be crazy.
It's going to be super crazy. But you know what? I do have high hopes, and I do feel like things will go back to normal sooner than all of us think. At least that's my hope. But I do think that things will get better. And if your experience in your career has taught me anything, is that you're able to maneuver pretty quickly. I mean, you were able to make an album in like 12 days, dude. so I'm sure that you, out of all people, you'll be fine. Trust me. I have no doubt.
Thanks, Eddie.
An asteroid can hit the world and you'll be fine. But anyways, thank you so much, my man Joshua, for joining me on the show. I do appreciate the conversation, and I think we're all keeping our fingers crossed, right?
Awesome. Eddie, thank you so much. You take care of yourself, okay?
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Mondo Cozmo. I know that I definitely did, and I am beyond excited that I got the opportunity to chat with him about songwriting. As I mentioned in the interview, I'm not very experienced when it comes to songwriting. I'm primarily a drummer-producer, but songwriting is something that has interested me for a very long time, primarily because I respect the art form so much. I think there's so much talent that goes into being able to write lyrics and melodies in a way that just speaks to the masses. It's definitely a lot easier said than done, and Mondo's music to me is a classic example of less is more. His approach, his ability to hone in on an idea and decipher relatively quickly if he can actually use it or not, I think it's frankly very impressive, and I think it's a good lesson for us to remember. I think usually us as people, we tend to know exactly what we want to do right off the bat, and I think that transfers over to being creative and when we create music as well. And I think his experience in writing that album in such a short amount of time and the way he writes music on the daily, I think it's a good reminder that we shouldn't overcomplicate things sometimes. Usually our soul and our heart knows exactly what we're trying to say when it comes to our art, and I think Mondo has honed in and found a good balance so that he's able to create in an efficient time, but also give himself the freedom to do it in the way that he sees fit. And I definitely recommend you to try something similar. Maybe not the exact same way that Mondo Cozmo does it, but definitely to find your own version of it. And I think you'll find that it helps to create things in a way that you're proud of, but also in a very efficient way. And hey, if you enjoyed this conversation, definitely consider subscribing. You can find the show anywhere that you can hear podcasts. You can find it on Spotify. You can find it on Stitcher Podcast. Love you, Stitcher. You can find it on iTunes, Anchor FM, anywhere that you can find podcasts, you can find this show. And I definitely urge you to subscribe because I have as many cool conversations as I possibly can with the hopes of giving you conversations that inspire you to work on your craft and to put your stuff out there, because at the end of the day, we're all trying to push ourselves to be the best that we can be, and that's really what matters at the end of the day. And so I hope that you enjoyed this conversation, so stay tuned because I have tons of great content coming your way.